What is up, my beautiful people? Happy Monday to all of you. Hope you had a great weekend. Exile451 here again with your daily dose of Reddit happy. You guys have really been loving these sort of rags to riches stories I've done lately, so we're gonna keep on that trend and hit up r/AskReddit today to hear some more. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you'll know when I've got more happy content up. Now sit back, relax, and get inspired by other people's success. Not me, but my dad. And as a result, he is the epitome of what it means to really make the American dream for me, and so I get very upset when people try to say that it is dead. He was born in a literal chicken shed in Mexico, the last son of my grandpa's 11 children. After moving to Juarez when he was 7, he decided he wasn't going to stay in Mexico. He was going to move to the United States when he got old enough and actually do something with his life. When he was 14, after disobeying my grandparents' wishes for him to stay and continue to run my grandfather's corner convenience stores, he illegally immigrated to Texas and, as always, did well in school. I will concede that he did have one thing going for him, and that is that he is incredibly smart. That, coupled with his work ethic, allowed him to continue to do very well in school, specifically math and science. He was adopted by a family friend in the US, allowing him to gain citizenship and continue to work and go to school. After graduating high school, he attended Texas Tech University and graduated with a bachelor's degree in petroleum engineering. During this time, he also worked a full-time job at Albertsons, as well as summers and breaks in slaughterhouses to make enough money for my mom, whom he had met, as well as for my infant self to survive on. After graduating, we moved to California as he already had a position lined up with a very large oil corporation. He took advantages of opportunities overseas, as well as other jobs, and has been on the up and up ever since. He is now a co-owner of a small oil and gas company, and his net worth is only growing. He could retire right now at 42 and live very comfortably, but he would never do so. The reason he is where he is now is because of his incredible dedication to hard work, a trait he has tried to instill in me. To put it one way, the only way I will ever feel I have lived up to his expectations is if I add an MD to my name. Working on that. That is my father's literal rags to riches story. He has all the quirks of a man who had nothing to the man who can have everything. He's incredibly frugal, yet when he wants something, he will attain it. He saves a good quarter of all his income, yet when my mother wanted a new car, he didn't search the used car lots. No, he bought her the newest model A4 Audi. I love my father, and if I could be half the man he is, I will do very well in life. I grew up in a pretty poor family in a very bad neighborhood and went to really bad public schools. I got involved with the wrong crowd, drugs, gangs, etc. Lots of juvenile offenses. When I was about a junior in high school, for some reason, I got really interested in learning and reading. All of my friends had dropped out or cut school 80% of the time by junior year. Well, I cut school at least half the time too, but I started reading and learning as much as I could. I don't know what made me get interested in this, but it probably saved my life. Anyway, I barely graduated high school and didn't plan on going to college. I wound up getting a really good sales job and making great money. This enabled me to purchase my own house at 19. After a few years in sales, I realized that although I was doing really good now, I would be really limiting my future without a degree. I started going to night school with the plan on going to law school right after, and I did just that. I enrolled at one of the top law schools in the country, rented my house, and moved. Not only am I the first generation in my family to go to college, I actually went to a prestigious law school. I worked hard and got a gig at a big firm in my home state right after school. It's been a year and a half since then. All of this has given me a really interesting perspective about poverty and socioeconomic problems. I'm living proof that upward mobility and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps is possible. At the same time, it's impossible to deny that the cards are stacked against the poor. All of my high school friends are in the same vicious cycle. They all have menial or no jobs, had kids early, didn't go to college, etc. My family was doing okay until my dad got laid off by IBM. He'd been working there for 10 years and didn't know what to do. Of course, his parents, my grandparents, decided to think that getting laid off was the same as getting fired, so they told him to completely change industries. And, of course, my dad decided to listen to them because he takes everything they say as gospel, doesn't question it at all. He tried being a bank teller, selling mortgages and loans, and so on. Eventually, he decided to go into the hospitality business and be a hotel manager. He sunk every last dime he had into some hotel. Bought the whole thing, actually. Things were going well for a while. But my parents' inexperience caught up with them and they lost it all. We were on food stamps and all kinds of assistance. Fast forward a few years and we're still poor. I am in college now and decide it's a huge waste of time and money. I had learned a lot more on my own than in some classroom. So I got a job at a company doing tech work. It wasn't anything glamorous, but I was making money and getting experience instead of paying money to a school for sitting in a classroom. I bounce around from job to job doing contract work because the economy sucks and no one wants to hire people as an actual employee. The whole time, I'm saving money like Scrooge. Anything that's not totally essential to my survival is not worth being spent. Things are going okay, but I'm still looking for a big break and getting a full-time job somewhere. In the middle of all this turmoil, I meet a girl and we really hit it off. She's really the first person I could talk to and just be myself with. Things are going good with her, and I'm slowly building up a foundation for myself and possibly her. I keep getting jobs with better pay, and the experience and skills really start to add up on my resume. We get married and eventually get our own place. We'd been living in a studio beforehand. I finally get a big break and get a job somewhere that pays really well and likes to hire people full-time instead of using a revolving door policy. And that's where we are now. We're looking to start renting a house after our lease expires and eventually start looking to adopt a child, since she can't have kids, unfortunately. Hopefully, stuff works out. How about a riches to rags to upper middle class with the chance of riches story? I was born into a wealthy family in the early 1970s. My grandfather had done well, and we had a booming family business. This included for a time a large manufacturing facility, which later closed down, but a string of retail stores were left. They were very successful, and the number of family members in the business grew to include my aunts, uncles, and cousins. Through the 80s, my parents became heavily involved in the jazz scene, and with millions at their disposal, quickly became hardcore cocaine addicts. Things got bad enough that they lost millions through the years. In my early teens, my mother left my father, and I went from living on a 37-acre estate to living above a newsstand in a one-bedroom apartment. I moved out shortly after and started out, more or less, on my own around the age of 15, though I did have the benefit of some good friends that let me sleep on couches and the like. At this point, I was flat broke, only had to be on food stamps once, but I think that qualifies as down and out, don't you? I started to work restaurants and managed to get things together. Enough to survive. I also graduated from high school and later would get a degree, though by that time I was married with a 3-year-old and working as a web developer for IBM. Continuing during this time, my father and brother, who had been pulled into the world of drugs by my parents at a young age, eventually ended up in jail for a variety of things, and my cousins and aunts and uncles systematically pulled the various pieces of the business that he had control over from him in exchange for things like bail. It should be noted, this was awful treatment. My father and brother were shells of people at this time, having become classic heroin junkies, and my extended family used it to their financial advantage. I get tough love, but this was people taking advantage, literally taking entire retail stores away from my dad. Maybe he deserved it, probably not. I'll let others make the moral judgments. The last piece of the puzzle was my grandfather's will, which had been written to support my father with a small monthly allowance with the remainder of his estate going to me, roughly $2 million about 17 years ago. 2 weeks before my grandfather died, one of my cousins convinced my grandfather, who was at this point in intensive care and heavily sedated, to change his will unbeknownst to anyone but him and the shady lawyer who would get a very nice fee for executing the will and trust for years to come. I got $1,200. My father got nothing. Over the ensuing years, my brother died of a heroin overdose. I got to find him head down on a coffee table next to a needle. And this finally straightened out my father, who against all odds is now a successful businessman again, having been given a break by a friend of his from before things went all downhill. Meanwhile, I had pretty much cut off all ties from the rest of my extended family, and after my brother's death, all ties with my immediate family. I ended up living 3,000 miles away working at a mid-level job. I caught a few breaks over the years, making it through the internet boom and bust without either cashing out or getting downsized, and started to thrive. Over the last 7 years, I've worked extremely hard and am now a C-level executive at a hot startup. I make good money, and not quite screw you money, but have some good options, and the possibility to put myself in a position that retirement at approximately 50 is a thing. I'll probably never be super rich, but I'm okay with having my house paid for and driving a Passat and getting to choose what I do rather than being part of the rat race. I'll call that riches for my purposes. Not mine, but a friend of mine. His great-grandfather was living in Seoul right after the Korean War. The city was building up fast, but while millions of people moved in, they forgot one very important thing. The city didn't have a sewer system. My friend's great-grandfather had a decommissioned army truck and would move everyone's crap out of the city for them. As soon as he could, he bought another truck and eventually had a monopoly on moving people's crap while the city was working on a sewer system. He was making loads of money, but he knew it wouldn't last, so he bought up as much land around Seoul as he could. The family has sold off bits and pieces over the years when needed, and still has large and extremely valuable plots of land to sell off as the city continues to grow. Those are some incredible stories that just go to show that it doesn't matter your circumstances, anything is possible. Just because you start with money doesn't mean you'll keep it. Growing up impoverished doesn't mean you're doomed to stay that way. And success can be found by any means, even smelly and degrading ones. No matter your circumstances today, you can always work to attain something better. Remember that this week. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and found these stories as inspiring as I did. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you can get your daily dose of Reddit happy every weekday. Also, do you have a rags to riches story? I'd love to hear it, so feel free to tell it in the comments. Thank you all again so much for watching. I'll see you all tomorrow. Until then, I'm Exile451. Stay beautiful, people.